All right, good morning everybody. Welcome to the 529th meeting of Canterbury Regional Council. This morning we have two speakers in our public forum, two citizens who have taken the time to come and present to us. There will be Roger Bray, who's going to present to us around the recent flooding, and online we'll have Ines Davis, and I see you there, Ines, alongside Nikki. Hello. And we'll be coming to your session in a moment. And she'll be talking about particularly wallabies and grazing in reserves and places like that. The meeting is being recorded but not live streamed. It'll be put up on the site on a later occasion. I'd like to invite Tumu Taiao, and Cranwell to give mihi whakatau, followed by Councillor Lan Fan, who will give us karakia. Thank you, Yayan.
Tēnā tātou katoa, nei anō te mihi kia koutou katoa, ko rau e ka mai I tēnei rā mo tēnei hui mo te kaunere Taiao ki utaha. Me tuatai ki te rukarawa, nō nā te whakamutunga, nō nā te timataka hoki I tēnei wā, no reira te tātua, tēnā koe. Mihi hoki ki te hapu o te rohi pōtai nei, o ngai tua uriri, kia koutou, mo te tiaki manaki, ia mātou I noho ana ki rongo tēnei whenua a tēnā koutou. Hoki I tēnei wā, mihi atu ki te whānau, ki te rarata, whānau nei wā, kia kaha e hoa, kia kaha mo tō huarahi kei moia ia koe I tēnei rā, ka nui te aroha mai mātou, kia koe e te rangatira. Koutou, koutou I hara mai I tēnei ata, kia koe, Roger, tēnā koe, nau mai hara mai, tēnei wā, kōrero e pāna te waipukutia, ki te hakatere, ngā mahi o te kaha, hei tawa wā, no reira, tēnā koe. Hoki kia kōrua, ki runga e te puraki nei, kia koe Ines rau ko Nikki, pai kia kite ia kōrua I tēnei wā, no reira, tēnā kōrua. Tēnei wā hoki, kua whetu mai a matariki, me ona tamahine I tēnei wā, a piata mai I te ata ki te rāwhiti, te tohu o te tauhou Māori, no reira mātahi o te tau, manawatia mai a matariki I a tātou katoa. Just standing here acknowledging the mana whenua of this rohe, o ngai tuahuriri. Also acknowledging the rising of matariki and the acknowledging the new season ahead, the new year ahead, but also the ones who have passed on and have been, as we say, wheturangi tia, have been cast off into the skies to forever shine upon us when we look back and remember the ones who have passed on. This year, I remember Liz Brown asked about which star was shining the most. And one of the ones I saw was Hiwa I te rangi, and Hiwa I te rangi as the star to wish upon, as the one to show good fortune for the season ahead. So with that, I wish you all the best for in the coming year, and hopefully all your dreams and aspirations will be fulfilled. On that note, no reira, tēnā koutou, a tēnā tata katoa. I'll hand over to Councillor Affirm for karakia. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Ko whakataka te hau te karakia, tākina te karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E he ake ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora.
Thank you, Councillor Farn. Now, we'll just note that we have a couple of documents that have been circulated and are now circulated on the table. The papers, that the piece written by Roger Bray, the Code of Conduct, a new version, because there was some corrections that needed to be made from the document on the published agenda, And a later item, item 10, Whakakotahi, New Zealand Transport Agency. Apologies, there's no apologies. Conflicts of interest, there's no apologies at this stage. So now we're turning to the public forum. The first speaker I'd like to welcome to the table is Roger Bray to talk to us about the flooding down in the Ashburton area. So if you'd like to come up, Roger, you have 10 minutes and then we'll see if there's any questions from councillors, and so it's over to you. Thank you so much for coming along and taking your time. Just pop that button on. Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. I'm Roger Bray, resident in the Green Street area of Ashburton that was part of the flooding process at the end of the month. Bit of background, I worked for the South Canterbury Catchment Board for one winter, and that was a government scheme. I was involved in a bit of chainsaw work and river protection work. I remember sitting on top of the stop banks with Tommy Goodwin in a truck when I think it must have been the 1986 flood, and we were sitting on the top of the stop banks looking at the how much more freeboard we had in the river, and I thinking back of how we've had a recent disaster in that area, I thought, well, we were pretty crazy to be sitting there. Anyway, I served one term on a river rating liaison committee. Around the year 2000, I was part of a group that opposed a resource consent for the stop banks to protect the town, and that came with an associated discharge consent to discharge water in the area that I reside. As part of the group, we were not actually opposed to putting up stop banks, but we were opposed to a different level of flood protection for different people on either side of a river. In my submission, I offer comment on the recent flooding event and in the civil defence response. And briefly, the civil defence response, in our case, we saw about 60 people evacuated. That took most of the day, and I just am concerned that if the community in Ashburton think they're going to evacuate 3,000 to 4,000 people in the event of a flood, I think that's just a pretty wishful think. I seek comment from ECAN regarding a proposal back in the 1999 stop bank proposal to remove 320,000 cubic metres of gravel that accumulated in the North Branch of the Ashburton River. I believe that funds have been collected for that process, and I don't see any stockpiles of gravel that would have been associated with that process had it taken place. I offer suggestions regarding the cost and reinstatement of land after a flooding event, such as we've had. I know we can't change things for what's happened, but maybe for the future we can have a look at how things might proceed. I acknowledge the support given by organisations such as the Rural Support Trust. It's all very well to cater for the emotional needs of people, but sometimes there's a bit of physical work and a bit of financial assistance that could go a long way in helping some of these people. And lastly, I invite questions on anything that I've written.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. Is there anybody that would like to ask Roger a question? Councillor Nikki Southworth.
Just could you elaborate a little on, you talk about additional damage being worse than you would have otherwise expected because of the presence of the embankments? I know all the flood protection infrastructure. I just wonder how you reached that conclusion. What's your reasoning?
You actually, it's a flood.
Oh,
Sorry, in the case of a flood, you can only shift it round. And what I see is that we actually shifted that flood from one group of people to another group of people. And I don't have a problem with protecting people in a town, because you know a lot of people live in town and it would be pretty devastating for the flood to go through them. But I'm suggesting the people that were flooded took a hit for the benefit of those people in the town, and I just think that the community funding and the restoration of their properties should be part of the community funding, just the same as there is a community funding for the protection of that town. So this I see as an ongoing process, and I know that ECAN in their frequency answered questions say that we will not pay, the community will not pay to reinstate any land that has been damaged, and in some cases that's pretty major. There's this whole shingle everywhere and rivers everywhere. So and the reinstatement, I suggest, doesn't need to be clearing it of shingle. I suggest that we, any shingle that comes out of the river, leave it there, because that's how the Canterbury Plains were formed. Gloss over it, level it off, and reinstate that back into productive farmland if necessary.
Thank you. Councillor John Sunkel.
Yeah, thank you for your submission and thoughts. Do you have a view of how we could, if we so chose, to find a mechanism for community funding to do what you might propose? So yes, you could hypothetically say we saved Ashburton because of the 1 in 200. We've got the 1 in 50, which is allowed the spread. Do you have a mechanism in your mind of how we might fund or
You have to fund the works for the stock bank. That was to provide. I suggest that rating could be decreased, and you would only need to rate a small portion for the ongoing maintenance and any remedial work should the should you need funding for restoration of push that on somebody else.
Oh, thank you very much. Councillor Grant, Edge.
Thanks very much for your, and I just particularly looking at the alternative view that you were talking about, suggesting that perhaps in terms of the way that stormwater is managed, that greater consideration should be needed for the floodplain issue, overland flow paths and structures within that overland flow path. Is that a way you see of limiting damage?
I think individuals within the community have got to accept a greater proportion of the risk rather than the community accepting that. And if it means building our floor levels up higher, that's what I think should happen. For instance, if you go down Racecourse Road now, there's 2 buildings being constructed, and they are only probably a couple of 100 metres apart. And just driving down the road, I think there would be, you look at one foundation as opposed to the other, and there's probably 200 mils difference in floor level between the 2 foundations. Now, if you get a flood going through, it's understandable that the person who built 200 mils higher is going to be thinking, well, it might not get to our place, but the person down further, well, we've got 100 mils through our floor, ruined all our carpet.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We've got Councillor Mackenzie and then Councillor Peter Scott. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you, Roger. And look, if I can just
say that most of the points in in fact, all the points in your submission are things that we are reviewing now. I don't know if you're aware, but we formed a catchment subcommittee before the floods, I have to say. And it went from being probably a place to get rid of pesky councillors to one where it suddenly has quite considerable importance going forward. But in fact, all the points within your submission here are things we are reviewing on the Ashburton River and other rivers within the district. And so there will be some meetings which hopefully you'll be able to come to, Roger, to give your points of view as to how that review should be handled. So thank you.
Thank you for explaining that, Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Roger. And, it's a pretty good summary, I guess, of what's happened. But my question is, what conversations are you having with the Ashburton District Council in terms of their planning and the way they are going about allowing what you just said to happen? That is a floodplain. My understanding is that Jessop's went, then that's where the water would go. So is there a conversation that you're having, or is there a group of people having with ADC? Your button, Roger. Your button.
I don't believe anybody's talking that way at the moment. There's been money offered by the government. I know we've had a wee bit of expense. A digger, probably 4 hours of a digger, maybe 100 metres of fencing replaced, but our damage is really insignificant.
Can I just rephrase what I was trying to get you? The answer was the district plan sets out where you can and can't do things. Okay, so your comment that you made about the houses and the different foundation heights being in a floodplain of Jessop's Wind, is there consideration in the district plan for that you know about? And if there isn't, are you guys going to do anything about that? Your button, Roger.
I don't believe there's anything in the district plan that copes with that sort of thing. I presume that the floor level issue is between the council and the builder, and I believe that the council have approved, or that they have their process to approve the floor heights. So I don't think there's any solution. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Is there any other, Councillor Craig Pauling?
Kia ora. And yeah, I sort of can understand where Councillor Scott's going with that in terms of the district council setting those zones and the floor levels and stuff, but it is informed by some of the information that we hold here at Environment Canterbury. So next time they do their district plan review, or that we do our regional policy statement, we could have an influence on that, I believe. So that's something that we should be thinking about as well during our planning updates coming up. I was quite interested in what Councillor Edge said about overland flows, and just wanted to understand. I think I understand this, that you accept that, you know, with the work we've done on the river, the flood protection stuff we've done, the stock banks, at times the river's going to break out and it's going to go through somewhere. But what you're, and so you accept that, I think. But what I'm interested in is, yeah, we've obviously, through the process of what we've done to the rivers, we've lost a bit of scope within the river itself, within the corridor of the river. And just wanted to understand your perspective on that. And do you think there's a way to retrofit that, or is it just down to the process of overland flow paths having to have them engineered so that we know where it's going to go, and then, like your proposal, find another funding mechanism to then help the rehab of that land? Yes, I'm interested in sort of two things there.
I believe the damage has already been done with our rivers. Canterbury, or the Ashburton region, was a huge swamp at one stage when they started draining the swamp from the sea backwards. And all our land that actually acted as a sponge years ago is not acting as a sponge now. It's all converted so that any rainfall that falls, it just switches straight out to sea. So, you know, as time progresses, I can see that our river flows in emergency or in heavy rainfall times are going to be swifter, faster, and it's basically the rivers have become a drain. I don't think we can change that, and I don't think we can get back to where we were years and years ago.
All right, well, thank you very much, Roger. We'll be taking what you've said into consideration, and we'll be asking the CEO to have a look at the questions that you've asked, and then we'll be asking her to reply. So you'll be getting a reply to us around this. So thank you very much, and we'll just pass a resolution now around that. So you're welcome to stay there for a minute. So I'm just calling for a mover, moved by Councillor Peter Scott, seconded by Councillor Ian McKenzie, that the council receives the submission from Roger Bray and refers the matter to the CEO to reply. So is everybody in favour? There being no, is anybody against? No, there being nobody against, that's carried. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for coming. If you can just go, you're welcome to stay for as long as you like, but we'll be back in touch with you by letter. So thank you very much. So now we're going over to welcome Ines and Nikki. I did notice that we lost connection with you a wee bit ago, so let's hope this connection is okay. We can see you and probably hear you at the moment. So over to you, but you've got some slides. There's a presentation that we're going to be able to see, are we? Yes. Yeah, so we'll get that organised, but just start out when you're ready. Thanks very much.
Kia ora, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I can't see the...
Just letting you know that we can see the slides.
Okay, and I can't see them. Okay, I'll start off. Here we go. Thank you. I will take you through the first part of the PowerPoint, and then Nikki Snoink, the Forest and Bird Conservation Manager, will take you through the second part. I'm based at Geraldine. I'm a member of Forest and Bird and also a member of the Biosecurity Advisory Group. To raise awareness of forest collapse, I presented the first part of the PowerPoint at the recent Biosecurity Advisory Group meeting. The suggestion was subsequently made that we present this topic today at your council meeting. Next slide, please. The issue of forest collapse is not unique to South Canterbury. I'm just using local examples where substantial damage is evident in South Canterbury and scenic reserves and other significant natural areas. Outlined in light green, you can see the Tasman Smith Scenic Reserve, which is near Cannington, off Cave on the way between Pleasant Point and Fairley. Next slide, please. This scenic reserve is not well known. It's a scenic reserve under the Reserves Act. It's administered by the Department of Conservation. On the DOC website, it's listed as a hunting block and requires access from the adjacent landowner for permission to go to the block. Other than that, not many people know about it. It's got a paper road as an access. And so few people know that this is a gem. Next slide, please. Why is this reserve special? It includes a small stand of silver beech trees. Native beech trees on the east coast of the South Island are uncommon. There are just a couple of other patches within scenic reserves and that are protected under scenic reserves management. And there may be some other small patches in other areas, but very few protected. Next slide, please. We came across a good population of the climbing groundsel. It's an at-risk declining species. It's a relative of the ragwort, hence it's not palatable to stock or pest animals. However, it is dependent on trees and shrubs to climb. The absence of support is evident in large areas of the scenic reserve. Next slide, please. This is a sketch from the Kelly report prepared in the 1970s for Lands and Survey. And in the top, towards the top left there, you can see the little green patch, which is the patch of silver beech trees. The woodland areas contain kowhai ribbonwood, narrow-leaved lacebark, broadleaf lemonwood, lancewoods, kaikomako, madipole, and some coprosma species. Next slide, please.
That's number 50 now.
This is an image of the woodland area. No undergrowth to be seen anywhere. We came across several wallabies during our recent visit. They hardly moved and we were within close range to them. Earlier on, we also saw 2 deer. So you can see the bare earth with no regen taking place. Next slide, please. The 3 images here, taken in nearby scenic reserves, are at Mount Nimrod, Matata, and Upper Pareora. As you can see, there's a lack of undergrowth in these reserves as well. And it shows how serious the issue of forest collapse is. Next slide, please. The Tasman Smith Scenic Reserves and others mentioned in the last slide are within the Wallaby containment area. The bare earth that's creating by the eaten out undergrowth contributes to silting in the stream that goes through this particular reserve. The absence of undergrowth means that there's no succession, which ultimately will result in canopy collapse. Hunting is ineffective. New populations of deer and wallaby will invade the area time and time over. Next slide, please. Solutions to halt the decline of the biodiversity values would clearly require the exclusion of stock and browsing animals. Deer fencing of these reserves would ensure that we don't lose them outright of what is left. Additionally, predator control would help the native fauna. I'm aware that ECAN has contributed to the an area in Waimeti that's got an inclusion fence, so they've done control of wallabies there. These immediate measures that would result in protection and potential enhancement of remnant foothill forests. So the issue is really how can we do something immediately. The more broad issues, with that I'll hand over to Nikki now. Thank you.
Kia ora. Next slide, please. Kia ora, Enos, and kia ora, Councillors. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. I'm going to talk to you about a recent report that shows how our native forests, which should be our most powerful carbon sink on land, are actually bleeding carbon because of the destruction of introduced pests, browsing animals like possums, goats, deer, pigs and wallabies that Ines has just alluded to. And she's also alluded to the fact that this is not limited to South Canterbury, it's actually happening all over the country. So I just want to bring your attention to our report and how you guys might be able to use this report in your planning with regard to biosecurity. Oh, by the way, I'm Nikki Snowink. For those of you who don't know, I am the Regional Conservation Manager for Forest and Bird in Canterbury, and I'm also on the Mid-Canterbury Biosecurity Advisory Group. Next slide, please. So yes, our report can be found here at this particular link online. It's called Climate Change and Introduced Browsers, Forest and Bird. And could you just tap the next button, please? This link contains a summary of our report. It's quite a lengthy report, but there is a 6-page summary called Native Habitat in Carbon Crisis, and it's really easy to read. It's got lots of pictures and it just sort of sets out the key points. And the full report is also there. It's called Protecting Our Natural Ecosystems as Carbon Sinks. Next slide, please. So the key points here, there's a picture. This report here refers to all of these animals and pretty much describes what Ines has discussed in her part of the presentation. And the key points in our report talk about control, and reducing the number of introduced browsers is a win-win outcome for biodiversity protection and for production, and for carbon sinking abilities of native forests, shrublands and tussock lands. Increasing the coordinated pest control with other agencies like LINZ and DOC and stakeholders and iwi. Anybody who's interested in doing predator control, this needs to have much more coordination to make sure it happens in a timely way. And also supporting research, long-term and comprehensive research on native ecosystems, and to give a clearer picture of greenhouse gas emissions and the ability for carbon sinks to inform future management decisions. So this is a really urgent problem. We need to get on with this because right now these forests are at risk of collapsing because there is no regeneration happening because of the numbers of animals eating them. The possums in the canopy, and then the pigs and goats and deer and wallabies that are invading from the bottom side. So yeah, from top down and bottom up, these forests are under real threat. So yeah, the key points are about control, coordination and research. These are the things I think that you guys should pick up on in the report. Next slide, please. These are some recommendations where our report might be useful for you in your work with regard to biosecurity, your responsibility for biosecurity. I'd strongly recommend reading Forest and Bird's report, especially the summary if you haven't got time to dig into the whole thing, and especially for the development of your own climate change strategy and the role of doing pest control to protect our existing forests as carbon sinks. Also, it will be useful to consider how integrated pest management could occur to restore and protect these places, and especially in areas like the reserves mentioned. Next point, please. And we strongly recommend supporting research and development of new browser control methods, especially for eradication of things like wallabies. Currently in the pest management plan for Canterbury, they are to be contained, but the national strategy for wallaby is looking at eradication. And obviously we don't have the technology to do that just yet, but that will come, and we support research and development of those methods to achieve that. One of the things that will crop up in the future, I think, to help us along the way is to get some alignment between the Biosecurity Act and the Wild Animal Control Act, especially with regards to controlling deer. Currently that is DOC's jurisdiction, and you know these animals are not confined just to DOC land, causing issues, but also they're, you know, the other side of that is they're recognised as a resource for the hunting community, so we need to kind of work on that. And then once we've got the research and the development of the tools and and all, the toolbox completely full, I'd sort of suggest using our report to consider a review of your regional pest management plan to upgrade the status of pest animals like wallabies and some of the other threats out there for Indigenous biodiversity to help it restore and recover. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. I'd be very happy to come back and talk about our report in more depth after you've had a chance to consume it, and we can bring it to the biosecurity advisory groups for further consideration. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present, and happy to take any questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Ines, and thank you very much, Nikki. Ines, I love the photos you took. They were so clear and so easy to see what's going on. And Nikki, for your summary point, it'll be good for us to get a quick overview of your report. So thanks for showing us that. We've got a few councillors that want to make a comment. So we'll start out with Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie. A question.
Yep, I've just got 3 questions for Ines. So my first question is, Ines, how many remnants in South Canterbury are there compared with other areas, say Mid or North Canterbury? I mean, how important do you think preserving these remnants are in the South Canterbury landscape?
I think the issue is around what biodiversity values they contain. I don't know the difference in terms of numbers, how many reserves we've got in other areas. They're all quite different. We have a different biota in South Canterbury than Mid Canterbury or North Canterbury. And obviously these areas are scenic reserves. They were put aside for their values, which seem to be unique to the areas they're in.
So my second question is around you mentioned that they are within the Wallaby containment zone. I'll just clarify for everyone, just in case they're not clear, that being within the Wallaby containment zone means that we're not actually currently conducting a big pest control scheme in that area. It's only being carried out at the edges of the containment area. So in terms of solutions, I mean, it seems this is a Department of Conservation kind of area, isn't it? These reserves. So in terms of solutions, do you think that, you know, fencing or discussions with the Department of Conservation, I mean, what sort of things do you think would be effective to help keep the browsers out?
I guess in some areas it actually pays to look at the wider areas. For example, Tasman Smith Scenic Reserve, adjacent on the farmland, there's likely to be, it's in the Mackenzie District Council, so I'm not aware of the details, but under the Timaru District Plan, there would be significant natural areas adjacent to it, so that it needs to be looked at in the wider field, whether do you just protect the scenic reserve as a deer fence, or what's going to happen. A deer fence is just an immediate solution to make sure what we've got there isn't, you know, falling over. And yes, you're right, the Department of Conservation is administering the area, but as we know, they're not exactly having surplus funds to you know, engage in any of these issues. I have mentioned it to them that I was taking this issue to ECAN.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Councillor Megan Hands.
Thanks, Ines, and thanks, Nikki, for bringing this to our attention. Hey, just Liz has already asked one of the questions, which was around whether you've spoken to DOC or not. I assume you have from your answer. But you talked a bit about coordination too. Have you spoken to or alerted the landowners nearby to these reserves at all, given it is within the containment area, or the local deer stalkers or others at all at this stage, or is that still something that could happen?
No, I've only, in this instance of Tasman Smith Scenic Reserve, I've only talked to the Department of Conservation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. The next person is Lan.
Kia ora, thanks, Ines and Nikki. And thanks for being such active biosecurity group people, as well as Roger. Thank you for your contribution in that space. My question was around the actions from this, and particularly the coordination of control. One thing that I really wanted to flag for your attention and see if that is on the right track is a week or two ago, the biosecurity advisory chairs had a meeting initiated by Councillor Edge about how do we have a conversation of this pest and predator and browser control integration. So it came about because of basically pest-free Banks Peninsula and them focusing on, you know, pests, but not necessarily browsers, and a number of other issues in North Canterbury and Mid and South Canterbury about these browsers. So it's very timely. We're wanting to, and we've talked to staff about getting together all the agencies involved here. We know that there's a bunch of us, and we know that obviously the key to this working is landowner coordination as well. We have been told that something in August might be planned, where it's the details are coming together. But is that a step in the right direction of the kind of integration and coordination you're actually asking for? Is that to a higher level? Is that too high of a level, or do you think it's necessary for attacking this across the region?
I can probably speak to that, Lan. It's Nikki here. No, I think that's a really great step in the right direction. I think, first of all, it's really important to have all the agencies on side and talking about integrated pest management across the board. Doc, Lynn's, yourselves, even district councils, landowners, iwi, anybody who's interested, us. There's various different groups already happening, the Wallaby Governance Group, and they are also establishing regional coordination groups, I understand, for the rollout of that national strategy and how that occurs in the regions. And I understand there's also some stuff going on with deer within DOC as well, which may take the same kind of process as it rolls out a bit further. So yeah, deer are managed under the Wild Animal Control Act and not under the Biosecurity Act. So that's what I mean about getting some coordination and alignment between those two things. So regional councils have the ability to, you know, tackle that in their regions as well. So yeah, I think it's a really great step in the right direction. That's the kind of coordination we need. Pooling the money, pooling the resources. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Nikki. Councillor Edge, did you have your hand up? No, or was it you, Grant? Yeah, Craig, sorry.
Right. Kia ora kōrua. Thanks for your great presentation, but also alarming to see the issues going on in some of the remnants down there. Yeah, like others, I acknowledge that of course Environment Canterbury has a job around the wallaby control, and we have got some programs in place, and it's great that Lance mentioned that. I did ask Councillor Edge quietly what was going on there, so that was good. And I think that joint approach just really does have to happen, and we should play a part in that. So I'm glad that we can do that. I had a question around, I know that obviously fencing is one way of doing it, trapping's another in those scenic reserves, as well as the wider control in the wider areas. And I wondered if you'd considered, or some of the groups down there had considered, and this could involve us as well, kaimahi for nature or jobs for nature work. I don't know if there's any money still left, but it could be a good idea, and whether that had been worked up, because the runanga Aroa Whenua may be interested as well. So I just put that out there as an idea and wondered if you'd considered that or looked at that.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Great idea. I'm not sure that we have considered it yet, but it's certainly happening in other parts of the country, like the Rokumura and in the far north, the Russell State Forest, and those are sort of exemplar projects for these kind of integrated pest control, pest management, browser control, and pest animals like the possums, etc. And yeah, I think those would be really good models to watch how it could be rolled out further down in other parts of the country.
Right,
There's jobs, nature money for those.
Thank you, Nikki. Councillor Ian McKenzie has a.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Nikki, in your recommendations, you talked about, just trying to remember what the slide said, but it was research and development into alternative methods of pest control. Do you support the use of CRISPR technology? I'm assured by people who know what they're talking about that $1 million invested in CRISPR technology could take out the possum population in New Zealand. I mean, a forest and bird on side for that sort of technology, because that would make a clear difference. And my other concern about some of your recommendations and is that it seems to me that a lot of these small reserves sitting in conservation, in the conservation estate, because of the size and nature and their isolation, that they tend to be ignored by the Department of Conservation. Is it a failed model where there is no interested proprietor who is actually looking after those sorts of areas? And I compare it to a lot of my friends who farm actually not far from where that reserve is, who have QE2 covenants on their properties, which are full of life and full of regenerating bush but in private ownership. But because it's still in their land, they take an interest. And the issue here is that these pockets of what should be conservation in the state are actually ignored because the Department of Conservation hasn't got the time, the inclination or the money to actually manage and look after these areas. So is fencing not, I mean, I'm concerned that fencing may not be the solution. It's actually perhaps a different proprietorship model to make sure that somebody actually who cares looks after these reserves.
On your first note there, Ian, thanks for that. I'm not sure we have a position on CRISPR technology yet. I'll come back to you on that. And in terms of a failed model, I guess DOC has the internal problem of under-resourced, and a lot of land to look after. So, and that's where that idea of coordination comes in, to sort of pool the resourcing and the funding and the resources that we have to improve and restore these places. Yeah, I guess DOC has a lot of work to do with very little resources, and that's a problem that's had forever. It would be really good to see it increased so that they can actually take care of all these smaller places the best possible way. Fencing, I believe, is the short-term solution, because there's urgency here. These places are collapsing. Ines, do you want to add anything there?
Yep, I think I pointed out that it is an immediate action that needs to be looked at. Otherwise, we can't afford to wait another 50 years for anything to happen. We won't have a forest. And agree with what Nikki said with regards to funding. The Department of Conservation is interested in these things, but they just simply don't have the resources to do anything about it at this point in time.
Yes, one more question.
So why wouldn't, for example, giving that reserve to the 3 adjacent landowners on the proviso that they control the pests be not a suitable solution?
You mean giving? What do you mean by giving it to them?
Giving them freehold title to the land so that they actually have a proprietary interest in the land, with the proviso that it goes into a QE2 covenant and they manage the pest to look after the interests of the conservation estate there.
Oh, that's probably a conversation you'd have to have with the department.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nikki and Ines, for giving us some of your valuable time for the community. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it. There's certainly some ideas there that we can consider. And what we'll do now is we'll ask our CEO to investigate this, and you'll get a reply. Anything else you want to follow up with us, just Nikki, particularly you, we can follow up at our next catch-up. So I'd like to ask somebody to move this, moved by Councillor Lan Fan and seconded by Councillor Grant Edge, that the council receives the submission from Innes and Nikki, I'll put you in there too, Nikki, and refers the matter to the Chief Executive to reply. All those in favour, please say yes. Those against, there being nobody against, that's carried. Well, thank you very much, both of you. We'll be signing off now. So have a good day. Bye.
Kia ora, thank you.
you.
Bye.
Oh, you can stay on listening if you want to. But anyway, that's up to you. We won't cut you off.
Kia ora.
All right, we're moving on.
Yeah.
Item 5 on the agenda. Bye. Item 5 is the minutes of the last meeting on the 17th of June. Has anybody got any thing they would like to raise about the minutes on page 9 to 45 of the agenda? Councillor Scott.
Just a matter that I think we spoke about during the meeting was the audit report itself. I know that we were awaiting it, and I know we had confirmation from the auditor himself that it was an unqualified report, but I don't know if we've laid eyes on it. I don't know if the CEO can enlighten me any more than that.
Can I ask Catherine to come up to the table and address the question from Peter, please?
Sorry, I just strained a wee bit to hear that. I heard it was about the audit report being unqualified, and
I just to be confusing, but at the time that Gillian was here, we didn't have the report itself, the auditor's report, in our hands to look at it. We were assured that it was an unqualified report. Have we received it yet? I guess.
Yes, and it's now included within your long-term plan document. So
your button, please.
Oh, you'd think by now I'd know. It's included within your long-term plan document. Just can't remember off the top of my head what the page number is, but I'll find that out for you. So the printed version and the version that's gone up on the website actually has the audit opinion included within it.
All right, so if you can get back to us with the page number and where it is, anybody who wants to see it, we can look it up. In fact, we might just follow up with an email to all councillors pointing that out. That'd be really good. Thanks very much, Catherine. All right, moving on. Anybody else got anything else about the minutes they'd like to raise? All right, then I'll put it that the council receives and confirms as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of June. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Matters arising, we haven't got any today, Chief Executive? No other matters arising. All right, committee reports. Item 7, we're on page 47 of the agenda now. And the first committee that we're going to hear from is the Regulation and Hearings Committee. Over to you, Yvette Couch-Lewis.
Kia ora and thank you, Madam Chair. The minutes for the 17th of June were confirmed this morning. However, we do have a question that did come from that in terms of a clarification on page 49, 7.7, the under 7.1, 1, 2, 3, the third sentence, and I'd like to hand over to Councillor Lan Fan for clarification, please.
Thank you, Tumu Taiao, Councillors. This is just for clarification. It says in the minutes a wider discussion on the process and how councillors can link into staff decisions was requested. Just for clarification, this is purely about visibility over staff decisions rather than it being interpreted here that we're actually influencing staff decisions anyway. And it's such a critical point. We'd just like to note it, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lan Fan. Madam Secretary, do we need to do anything official about that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We will note in the minutes that clarification was.
Thank you.
Kia ora, then I would then ask, please, Madam Chair, to have our minutes approved to be passed through. Could you please do that for me? Kia ora.
Oh, thank you very much. That's excellent. It's moved by Tumu Taiao. Yeah,
If you can't move.
oh, she can't move anything. Can she move anything either?
No.
Or she you shouldn't be able to, no. So I'm wrong. Moved by Councillor Lan Fan, seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? There being nobody against, that's moved. All right. 7.1.2 is the Canterbury Water Management Regional Committee. Councillor Pauling.
Kia ora, tēnā koe Jenny, koutou mai, nā kai kaunihera. So this item presents the draft notes from a workshop held by the Regional Committee, which was actually the last formal gathering of the current committee, noting the decision by Council to refresh the Regional Committee and the current process that's underway for this. And I'm just going to put a plug in here for the chair applications are actually open at the moment and close on the 12th of July. So if there's people out there that are keen on that, they should do that. As well as community member applications will be open shortly. And again, I encourage those wanting to contribute to the future of the CWMS to apply. And at the workshop, the committee gave feedback on the draft 2021 Canterbury Water Management Strategy Targets Report, and also gave reflections on the priorities for the next committee. And there was also acknowledgement from Council of the achievements of the committee over time, and in particular, the role of long-standing regional committee members. And I'll note too that unfortunately Councillor Mackay wasn't there, but that she's been a member of that committee for a long time. So to acknowledge Councillor Mackay and also to acknowledge that Councillor Affirm was at the meeting, being the new councillor that will be going forward in the regional committee into the future. So yeah, with that, if there's no questions, I'd move that we'll receive the notes of the workshop of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy Regional Committee held on 15th of June 2021.
Thank you. I'll call for a seconder. Who would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. Any questions? Councillor Farm.
No question, Chair. Just a comment, really, just because we are receiving the last minutes. Thank you from the meeting. Just if we could note the council's appreciation for, and we don't need to go into huge detail, but there is just an incredible amount of community input that has gone into that committee over years and years, and some immense characters who have contributed in that space, and no doubt will continue to across their roles in Canterbury, and hopefully some going forward into this new regional committee. So just noting the council's thanks for that immense contribution. Kia ora.
Yes, thank you for reflecting on passing on to a new era in this space. So all those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that is carried. We're now on to item 7.2. It's the joint committees on page 56 of the agenda. I'll ask Councillor Sunkel to speak just briefly to the civil defence item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was a very short meeting, process-based, to appoint 3 local recovery managers. It was done a mixture of people in the room and teams online, and took about 5 minutes. I would therefore move that we receive, and it should be the unconfirmed minutes of the Canterbury Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meeting held on the 18th of June.
I'll call for a seconder for that. Thank you. Who would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Nicole Marshall. Are there any questions? All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're now up to item 8 on page 59, which is Council Decisions, Chapter 6 of the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement, Minister's Decision. I'll just ask Tammy or David or whoever's in the room would like to come up and just briefly give us an outline of the report. Thank you very much.
It's Andrew.
Oh, it's Andrew. It's Andrew. Your name's not on there, but I saw you sitting there, so I'm sorry about that.
Kia ora koutou, thank you. This report seeks a council decision to publicly notify the decision of the Minister for the Environment to approve proposed change 1 to chapter 6 of the regional policy statement under the streamlined planning process. We received the minister's letter approving the proposed change on the 28th of May, and the RMA now requires us to publicly notify the minister's decision and make the changes operative. If council agrees, the minister's decision will be publicly notified on the 17th of July, and the changes will become operative on the 28th of July. This procedural step to notify the minister's decision and make the changes operative is the last stage in delivering one of the key actions in our space on behalf of the Greater Christchurch Partnership.
Thank you, Tammy. Did you want to add anything, Andrew? Any questions anybody's got around this? Oh, Councillor Phil Clearwater.
Thank you for the report. I just wondered if you could remind me, just in terms of the submission we made, I just wondered in terms of the final decision making by the minister, how much were our submissions sort of taken into account, and if they weren't, were there any reasons given?
So the minister accepted the proposed change as submitted by us. Is that what you mean? So he approved it as submitted by the council.
But I thought we had some reservations too. Yeah.
No. The proposal was developed based on the findings of our space. Our space was adopted by this council, and the RPS change mirrored and gave effect to the Our Space document. As a council, we did not submit on the proposal to the minister, and however, we did provide a report analysing the submissions, and we also organised an independent peer review. Through all of that work, while some minor changes were made to the document, in my opinion, the document still gives effect, the RPS change still gives effect to the Our Space document. Did that answer the question, Councillor Clearwater?
I think it does, Andrew. I guess in terms of the impact of, I guess, the planning zones being able to be changed now is a concern, and remains a concern.
As a result of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, there is now the opportunity for developers to make private plan change applications outside of the future development areas. That is a concern of this council, and we have submitted in opposition to some of those changes that are outside this strategic framework. There are changes that have been proposed by developers inside the future development areas, and in those cases we've either been neutral or supportive. Those haven't gone through a hearing yet, so we don't know whether our submissions, either in support or in opposition, have been successful.
Thank you very much. That clarifies it for me.
Right, any further points for clarification? All right, it's really clear. Thank you both very much. I'll call for somebody to move. Moved by Councillor Megan Hand, seconded by Councillor Phil Clearwater, that the council resolves to publicly notify the Minister for the Environment's decision to approve the proposed change 1 to chapter 6 of the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement in accordance with clause 90, section 2 of schedule 1 of the Resource Management Act 1991, and B, that proposed change 1 to chapter 6 of the Canterbury Regional Policy Statement is to become operative on the 28th of July 2021 in accordance with clause 20 of schedule 1 of the Resource Management Act 1991. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you both very much. Cool. Now we're on the newly circulated item 8.2, which is the Code of Conduct, which is circulated to members, and everyone's got a copy. I want to thank staff for assisting us with the development of the code that we're adopting to replace the existing Code of Conduct that carries through over the triennium, over the election into this term. I'd like to note that we have conducted a workshop with some professional people around how we might work together in a respectful manner with each other, and how we might work towards or demonstrate that for the community that we are very professional and have a lot of trust in each other and work in a very transparent manner. So I think we've used the Local Government New Zealand template, which is the best practice recommendation for codes of conduct. And in that we have used a appendix related to social media adapted from the Ruapehu Council's decisions around this. So we're following best practice. So I think it's a really good effort that we've all made in getting to this code of conduct. So I'll move that we receive the members' code of conduct document and adopt the tabled members' code of conduct with all the markups underlined, indicating the alterations that have been accepted. Who would like to second it? Seconded by Councillor Lan Farn. Are there any questions? You want a question? Good.
Thank you, Chair. Just checking that was the one aspect that was more an oversight or error in the content is going to be changed, and that's just on page 3 where it refers to our old vision. Thank you.
Got that noted?
Yes, I got that in a minute.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other things anybody would like to raise? Councillor Megan Hands.
Just wanted to seek clarification on Appendix A, and the appendix noted as guidelines, and their status with respect to the rest of the code.
Councillor, I'd like to call Catherine to the table. Would you like to just comment on that, please?
Kia ora koutou. Appendix A is guidelines. It is what it says. I'm just looking hurriedly to find where it's referred to in the yes, I'm trying to find where in the code itself it refers to Appendix A, and forgive me, I'm hurriedly. Thank you. And the reference there at the very top of page 7 is that it is guidelines for the personal use. So guidance rather than binding.
All right, thank you very much. That's cleared up. Any other questions? Councillor Craig Fawley, or comment? What are you doing? You can speak to it. Yeah, we're up to that.
Kia ora. Yeah, look, I really want to acknowledge the work that's gone into this, and you know, things like codes of conduct and standing orders, they're there for as a backstop for us, and also they're always evolving as things change. Like this one's got social media stuff in it, which I'm sure wasn't there 10 years ago. So I really support getting this in place, and I think it's really important that it's up to date and it sort of acknowledges where we're at as a council, but also our relationship with our staff and the community. And I really support that's got our new strategic direction or new vision in there in the introduction. And also I also like the inclusion of the Environment Canterbury values on page 3, bottom of page 3. I support the small change that Lan has mentioned, the oversight there about making sure it refers to our current vision. And yeah, just overall, I really think it's just an important step that we take, and knowing that there'll be further changes over time. So I just really support the work that's been done and like to see it approved. Yeah.
Would anybody else like to speak? Well, it is a living document, so I endorse what's being said, and we need to keep it up to date. So thank you all very much for your work you've done on that. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody being opposed? There not being anybody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're up to Councillors' reimbursement policy, which is on page 109 of the agenda, and I'll ask Councillor Scott to speak to that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and if you don't mind, and if it's okay, Madam Chair, I'll read the recommendations which I'm prepared to move, and then I'd like to make some comment before we seek a seconder. So the recommendation, which is on page 109, reads: consider and adopt the Environment Canterbury Council's expense allowances and reimbursements policy as attached attachment 1 with track changes. So that's the motion we're considering. But in response to this recommendation is in response to an order's request that we do have this as part of the policy, so we're doing that. But in response to concerns that we probably don't cover this quite fully, we've also set up a small committee to work with Catherine Shaki in terms of making some amendments to this in the future. And those councillors are Councillor Mackenzie, Elizabeth Mackenzie, Councillor Claire Mackay, Councillor Nicole Marshall, and Councillor Megan Hands. So with that, Chair, I'll move that recommendation.
Right, who's going to second that? Seconded by Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. Are there any other questions or comments for Councillor Scott or Councillor Phil Clearwater?
Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that there will be an ongoing work group to fine tune it. I would just ask that there's clear reference in the policy in relation to the use of alcohol, and I just ask that that be a particular area that the committee monitor and keep an eye on. I'm sure it will be adhered to.
Yes, I think Councillor.
We will do that, Councillor Clearwater. That will be part of a number of things that we need to consider and bring back to council.
Thank you very much. That's good. So we've got that moved and seconded. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much for your work on that, Councillor Scott. Right, the next thing that we're going to move on to is page 123. And this is a process report around council meeting times and things like that. Is there anybody got any questions about that? It's all very straightforward, I think. Thank you to staff for developing those dates and getting that onto our agenda. So I will move from the chair that we affirm and endorse the updated council and committee schedule for 2021. Is there somebody who would like to second that? Seconded by Councillor Claire Mackay. Are there any questions around it? No. Anybody want to say anything? No. All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. No, anybody opposed? There not being anybody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're now on to page 126 of the agenda. This is the climate emergency update that we have on each agenda. I'll hand over to Councillor Vicky Southworth or Councillor Elizabeth Mackenzie. I believe it's going to be you. Thank you, Rick.
Yep, this is just a very brief update this time. So Environment Canterbury are currently in the process of preparing a climate change impacts report. And this is specifically for Canterbury. It's based on the NIWA data and it covers specific environments within our area, coasts, surface water, groundwater, land and air. So I'm not going to go into the detail of that. What I was going to ask is whether, I don't know, is Kim Davies here? Is anyone from, well, Fiona, perhaps might want to speak, might want to add a little bit more detail to that because the report is still in preparation. It hasn't actually been released yet. If you're comfortable speaking a little bit to that, that would be right.
Good morning, Koto. Thank you very much, Councillor Mackenzie. There's not a whole lot more detail to add other than what is described in the paper. As Councillor Mackenzie described, the report is in preparation. It builds on the projections that we have from NIWA, and those, of course, are based on emissions scenarios over the next 80 years. So happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much, Councillor Vicky Southworth.
I'm just interested. It mentions in here that that this report will sit alongside the Canterbury Climate Change Risk Assessment. I'm just wondering, how do those two interact, and one would inform the other, or are they two quite separate things?
Yeah, thanks. They will be two quite separate things, but they will be complementary to each other. So some of the key risks identified in the climate change risk assessment focus on the natural environment, and it's the natural environment that will be the focus of this report.
Were there any other questions? Councillor Grant Edge.
Thank you. My question is related to clause 8 on page 127. I was wondering if staff could come back to the committee and at some point and just clarify who is looking, or who will be looking at those issues related to impacts on recreation, culture, economic or social activities, and values that are currently outside the scope of the project.
Thanks. Yep, we're happy to come back to you on that.
Thank you. Another councillor had their hand up today. Was it you, Councillor Phil Clearwater?
Thank you for the report. And I just wondered if you could briefly, just in advance, let me know around paragraph 6, the aspects of the impact report are going to include terrestrial ecology. I just wondered if you could just give us a brief. I couldn't guess what that means, but.
So just briefly, the terrestrial ecology part relates to the flora and fauna on land. So impacts of climate change in relation to biodiversity. We're not focused on biosecurity in this report, but there will be some comment on the impacts of change on biodiversity.
All right, thank you very much. Any further questions? Well, it's moved by Councillor Mackenzie that we receive the update on the climate change work programme, and seconded by Councillor Vicky Southworth. All those in favour, please say aye. There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. We're going on to page 128 now, item 8.6, unbudgeted Capex item. I'll just ask Catherine if she'd like to come to the table and give us a quick talk about it.
Thank you. This is a matter that is over the budget allowance of $10,000, and so we need to bring the unbudgeted item to the council. It would normally have gone through PAR, but because this is relating to the 30th of June we've just had, and we close off next week, then we need to bring it to the full council. So I realise it's a relatively small amount, but it needs to have council approval because of that.
Does anybody have any questions around this? No, it's all right. It seems very straightforward. Thank you very much, Catherine. It's moved by Councillor Peter Scott and seconded by Councillor John Sunkle that we approve the expenditure. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? There being nobody opposed, that's carried. Thank you very much. Now we are going to go into public excluded shortly, but we have another item of business, 10.1, which is been circulated separately, has it?
Yes, the late item.
Yes, the late item that was circulated separately. It's a report, Whakakotahi New Zealand Transport Agency. The report wasn't included on the agenda as it only arose this week. The reason why the discussion on this matter cannot be delayed is that a decision is now required in July to align the contract negotiations with the next council meeting, which isn't scheduled until the 5th of August. And it is recommended that the item be considered in public excluded as it relates to contract negotiations. So I'm going to move that the council receive and consider at the council meeting on the 8th of July the report Whakakotahi New Zealand Transport Agency, that the report be considered in public excluded on the following grounds: enable the council holding the information to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations that are underway. That's under the Official Information Act, the Local Government Act. So I'll move that, seconded by Councillor John Sunkel. Any questions? All right, I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Anybody opposed? No one opposed. That's good. Thank you very much. Now we're on to excluding the public. Item 9 on the we exclude the public from the meeting. Who will second that? Seconded by Councillor Peter Scott. All those in favour, please say aye. That's carried. There's no other business. Oh, is there item 10? What is it?
We just make sure Joanne's in the moment. You right?
Stuart, do we need to talk about the GTP, the fare review? We were going to talk about. We wanted to use this opportunity, Madam Chair, to talk about the transport fare review. And Stuart's got we had a wee pre-meeting about this yesterday with Jessie and yourself, in terms of the process that we want to try and use to achieve that, because of the timeframes that we have and because of some other hurdles. So I'll hand over to Stuart.
Well, we're just going to look this up, we know, but we're letting you do it. Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, well, we can finish the meeting.
Do it.
I think a quick update's fine, just no decisions or not a debate.
All right. Okay, keep going. All right. Look, I think we might just do this after the meeting. I think this is more appropriate that we don't take it during the meeting. I'm making that ruling. Let's just move on. Notice of motion. There's no notice of motions. There's no questions on notice. The next meeting's on the 5th of August. I just asked for a closing karakia. Are you going to do that, Councillor Lam? Thank you very much.
Kia ora, and this is to this karakia is to send us on our way for our break. It's about clearing the mind, the heart, the spirit, and suspending high above us. Let's get out of here. So, onuhia, onuhia, onuhia ki te uru tapu nui o tāne. Kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairoa I te ara takata. Koia ra I rongo, whakairia a ki ki runga, kia tina. Tina. Homie, huie, tai.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.